Hi boys and girls, it's me Butch. My name is Terry David Silvercloud. Today is the 12th of January 2019. I'm in Vancouver. It's a sunny, coolish day. We're having a really mild winter here. It's a Saturday. So I gave you my name right. Terry David Silvercloud. You can search me. Google me, as they say, or whatever it is. I'm 74 years old and I live alone. I'm reclusive. I'm a photographer by trade, basically, and a painter in my old age. And when I was very young, I thought I was going to get into physics, and life got in the way. And in the past 15 years, I'm back into theoretical physics. Did I cover it? I don't know. Maybe. So to keep busy from, while I'm sitting around waiting to die, I make videos and try to be the artist that I am 24/7. I'm a visual artist, so I make videos, and I can be a bit of a Sheldon Cooper type. And I try to educate people about the things I know. So you're here because I'm going to tell you where the universe came from. I'm going to answer the question. I'm definitely going to answer the question for you. Where the universe came from. So when we're talking about this kind of stuff, we should make sure we're all on the same track. And by universe, I mean everything. Not just the Milky Way, not just our galaxy, but all of the galaxies, and all of reality. Where did it come from? So that's what we're going to talk about, and I'm going to answer it for you if you haven't figured it out for yourself, and you need not agree with me. And if you have comments or you want to leave your ideas, just feel free to leave a comment below. It's good for my ratings. So, I'm a scientist, basically. In spite of the fact that I got diverted into the art world, I've been playing with electrons since I was a kid. I knew how radios and television sets worked by the time I was 14 or 15, which may not be such a whiz kid today, but back in the late 50s it was, because I'm 74. So in the world of science, there are no stupid questions. There are stupid people. And before we get on that track, I want to just talk a bit about stupidity and ignorance. We're all ignorant. Ignorance is lack of knowledge. It's things we have ignored in our life for one reason or another, either deliberately, by chance, by accident. We all discover new things every day, and you may, I'm hoping, are going to discover something new today. I'm a real yacker. Bit of an ADHD type. So there are no stupid questions. So asking where the universe came from is one of the very first questions that people ask when they're thinking about much of anything. I'm sure the cave people ask such questions, and to them things like fire would be magic. But the really smart cave people would say, well, there is no magic, that's just superstition, and we'll figure out why fire happens. And I could tell you, we know why fire happens. We know all about fire now, and I don't have time to explain to you what fire is, but we know all about fire now. So I want to talk about ignorance and stupidity. Stupidity is like, Homer Simpson and Peter Griffin from the cartoons, Family Guy and The Simpsons, hopelessly dumb, and they're never going to be smart, ever. They don't want to learn, and their brains, they just don't tick on a very high level. That's okay, there's lots of those people around. They can be dangerous to all of us, and probably 50% of the population fall into that category somewhere. But Ignorance is just a lack of knowledge. So all questions are ignorant questions, and that's why you're asking them. You're ignorant. You're asking a question because you're ignorant of what you're trying to seek out. Do we get that clear? I'm not trying to offend anybody, and because I'm a Sheldon Cooper kind of person, people are going to often tell me what an a-hole or self-righteous a-hole I am, and what do I know? I know what I know, and I don't get a flying anything what other people think. I've freed myself from that. I'm an artist. Artists free themselves from those silly human emotional things. So, if you're trying to solve a problem like infinity and the origin of the universe, I hadn't mentioned infinity yet, have I? The first thing you have to start getting into your head is the concept of the infinite. And if you're really, really a deep thinker, a logical thinker, it will occur to you that infinity is just it's a reality. You cannot escape infinity. There are no gods out there, and there are no other worlds, and there are no other universes. All universes, I was trying to get that straight at the beginning. When we're talking about the universe, we're talking about everything. Whatever you conceive a universe to be, you may conceive a universe to be our galaxy. Our galaxy is really, really, really big. And we're just a speck of dust in our own galaxy, and our galaxy is a speck of dust in the universe. So you have to, if you're a really smart cave person and you're ignorant of everything, you're trying to solve a problem, and the way to solve a problem is to ask questions. So now you're asking them, and you have to break the problem down into parts. And one of the essential parts of where does the universe come from is the concept of infinity. Now, Big Bang Theory, which most serious astrophysicists would say, well, there may be some big bangy kind of things going on, but it just doesn't work. Big Bang Theory is so full of holes that it's the only reason anybody gives it any credence at all is that if you use some of Einstein's math on it, using the math that Einstein came up with which Einstein came up, we know it's got problems too. So using something which we know has problems to say something else is true just doesn't cut it at the cutting edge. But using Einstein's math, it would mean that all reality had to start from something even smaller than what I'm holding in my hand, and that is just plain ridiculous. If you're so silly to accept that, you are stupid. Seriously, you're stupid. It's just silly. It just makes no sense and should be dismissed immediately as well. Let's get that out of the way because it makes no sense. But there's lots of other. There could be explosions in space on a scale that are, we know there are anyway from supernovae, on a scale that are so vast that it's easy to imagine something like being more on a scale of a Big Bang. Like, it's quite possible that our galaxy started, the Milky Way and all galaxies, as a cloud of dust and collapsed very rapidly. Now, not just in a second, maybe 10 years or something, but that's very fast on a big scale. 10 years on a scale the size of our galaxy is really fast. If it collapsed and then exploded, that's a big bang, and it may have by these teensy bits of hydrogen goop which had gathered by a process called accretion. Accretion is how dust bunnies occur in the corners of your room. Little bits just touch other bits, and by what we call electrostatic forces, they cling to each other. And if you look at our universe as being some kind of a gaseous universe or a liquid universe, and that all things obey laws of flotation by displacement, where there is no real up or down except as determined by gravity, and gravity is determined by motion, as is your weight. Your weight is just the forces of you pushing to try to get to the center of the earth. And when you got to the center of the earth, you would, just like you might in outer space, you would no longer, you would be weightless, technically, because you're at the center of the earth. Now you're weightless. Go figure, eh? You only had a problem between there and space. I don't want to drift down on that path too far. I want to go, because I'm already up to nearly 11 minutes. Just get your head quickly, before I run out of too much time here, into the idea of thinking about infinity. And once you realize that all processes, even for you people that think there should be a God that rules over you, I'm an atheist. I think the idea of gods is so silly, it's just plain evil. But they all end up with this problem. I think it's called reductio ad absurdum, which means reducing it to the absurd. You know, if you have a God, you can't explain where God came from, and magic doesn't work in science. But the interesting thing about it, you know, if God was always there, that you could say, well, that's infinity. If your concept of God is the sum of the infinite, well, I can live with that, but that has no personality. Personality has to be within it. That makes me God, you God. Every living thing is the only way the infinite can express itself as life, and God by that nature would have to be the most evil of evil and the best of the best, and would have to suffer every horror that could possibly happen, but every pleasure too. And in the law of large numbers, everything sort of evens out, and somewhere in the middle, at one end, you're suffering every possible horror that could happen. At the other end, your life could not be more pleasant. You're having an orgasm a second and partying all day long, and while you're vacationing and dreaming and skiing and who knows what. But somewhere in the middle, you're the working class stiff, where you're paying the bills, and hopefully your life falls on the happy, more orgasm side of life than on the side where you die of a horrible disease and or get schmucked in some horrific accident. God would have to live every single one of those if God was the infinite. And if that's your definition of God, I can live with it. But no ruling gods. So I wasted a lot of time in not really getting to my part of the fact that realizing where the universe came from, you have to think of the infinite, and you just simply have to accept that it's existential. It never had a beginning, because as soon as you ascribe a beginning to something, now you've reduced it to magic if there's nothing that came before. So whether the universe has particular ways of regenerating itself or not actually doesn't make any sense on an infinite scale. It will be regenerating itself in some areas and building new areas in others. In the world of physics, the second law of thermodynamics pretty much guarantees that the universe has to continually fall apart. But the first law of thermodynamics saves it, because it means that nothing is ever really lost. Material reality is really an illusion of size, how big you are. You know, the bigger you are, if you were the size of the sun, this microphone here, oops, can you hear that? Would be nothing. So in an infinite reality of one, that's another logical conclusion you have to come to, is that to build something, you have to build it from something, and eventually mathematically you have to be able to describe the universe as coming from one single kind of something existing in an infinite reality. And the only way you can get around that is just to assume by observation something does exist. We don't know what it is, but it can be broken down into what would seem to us an infinitesimally small particle. It's a particle, and there's no space between one particle and the next. I ascribe it to calling that dark matter. But to us, it's a gas. And so long as it's not moving, it really has no energy, and that would be a Bose-Einstein condensate. Basically, the beginning of nothingness. It's nothingness full of somethingness, but not with any energy. It's not doing anything. The moment you hit it or something, then it would acquire energy, and it would have to find ways to dissipate it. But you could assume the beginning of reality was a Bose-Einstein condensate, and that is basically dark matter, which is some kind of particulate, which is so extraordinarily small that it's a gas to us. And you may say, well, how can that be? Like, well, this air I'm waving my arms through is full of very heavy atoms called oxygen and nitrogen. They're very large atoms. They're nothing to us. Our body is made of zillions of oxygen atoms. They're just all linked together, and they say, screw you, we're the bully, we're coming through. We have, by a planned accretion by the life forces of our DNA, formed a solid body in which we can go through what is somethingness. There's a gas here. You wouldn't want to be in space. There'd be nothing to breathe in. You'd be screwed. Plus, it'd be mighty cold out there. So by accretion, somehow from the infinitely small, larger and larger and larger bits of something come together, and they're all vying for space. There is at some point not this loop, but there is some kind of smallest something which mathematically, by the way, cannot be a sphere, because if it's a sphere, then it needs even smaller parts. It's just a mathematical reality. But if you can imagine it somehow having a smallest something that takes whatever shape is convenient, and the shape with the least number of sides is a tetrahedron, then any tetrahedral object, anything which has the least number of vertices, faces, and edges, would be the smallest object you could get. And what it would look like would sort of be like two triangles almost together. So at any one time, two of the edges were sharing almost the same space. By sharing this, that's how accretion happens. Forces of all kinds are happening, heat, electronic. But if two objects rest side by each, they both want the other out of the way, so one is pushing against the other. But now, once they're together, if they can start combining their motions together, their feet are at rest. That's what's happening at the center of our planet. All the bits of dirt, or whatever there is right at the very center of our planet, they're pushing against each other, South Pole against the North Pole. And the inertia of those particles is far less than the inertia of the particles at the surface, like where we are. That's why we're pushing down. So where did the universe come from? I just gone on too long, and I missed some points I wanted to make, and I tried. I hope you got something out of this, that you'll think logically, and that reality has always to have existed. There's no such thing as a beginning of time. Time is an illusion of how things change. And it's always right now where you are. And it's always that time for something somewhere else, but you wouldn't think of it that way. They would be thinking of their time, and there's a space and a space difference basically between you. So time is a kind of illusion, and you see change differently than your neighbor sees change. It comes down to this subject called relativity, which isn't nearly as complicated as everybody makes it out to be. But I don't have time for that. Now I'm up to 20 minutes, so I'm going to shut up. Please come again. Please leave a comment. I'm 74 and old. I'm allowed to be wacko. I sure hope you learned something. So I'm going to stop yakking and turn this sucker off. I have to look down here. Hope my sound's better. I keep working on the sound. I'm learning. I'm a very good photographer, but I don't know a lot about sound. I'm trying different mics and different mic arrangements and turning down all my levels and hoping my sound is getting better, making it work with my webcam, which has a crappy microphone. Bye from Butch.